Welcome to Helping Leaders Achieve What Matters. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Rebecca Colwell, and she's the CEO and founder of an organization called 10 Directions, an award-winning leadership development company that helps leaders around the globe transform their teams, communities, and organizations by becoming radically human-centered leaders. She's recognized as one of the world's two experts in integral facilitation and is a sought-out innovator on the topics of new models of leadership, adaptive organizations, and new ways of working. Over the last 2 years, she has been delivering innovative facilitative leadership intensives for chairs and CEO groups, and Rebecca and I co-facilitated an experimental learning session at Chair World, which is a conference of over 1,000 Vistage chairs worldwide. So please welcome to the podcast, Rebecca Colwell.
Thank you. Thanks. Wow. Thank you so much, Mark. It's really great to be introduced by you in particular. You always make everything so just engaging and spirited, and I really feel welcome. I'd like to take a moment to introduce a dear colleague, a friend, and someone with whom I've been on a bit of a collaborative learning journey over the last few years, Mark Taylor. Mark is a top leadership coach for Vistage, the world's largest executive coaching organization. He works with, I think it's over 100 clients in New York City with a mission to increase their effectiveness and to enhance their lives. He's also a retired CEO. He founded several companies. One became the 58th fastest growing company in the state, which he sold in 2005, and a high-tech internet startup that raised $20 million and went public in 2007. So in that short period of time, you were a very busy human. Mark's the author of the Leadership Field Manual, Exercises and Tools for Executing Culture Change, and his TEDx talk, which I highly recommend, was highlighted by Forbes magazine. So it's a delight to be here with you, Mark, and to share some more insights into how we can be more people-centered leaders, more radically human, and support people who work with us and around us for a better work and things that matter.
Yes, yes. Well, I thought what we would do today is, rather than talk about what is facilitative leadership, is have you coach me on a situation that came up last month that I've been struggling a little bit with in a facilitative leadership. So would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd be happy to see if I can help shine a light here or there. Do you want to say more about it?
Sure. So our model is that we put peers in groups, and as a chair, I facilitate those groups. Mm-hmm. And as you said, our mission is to increase the effectiveness and enhance the lives. But what I see that we're there is to help everyone grow personally and professionally. Mm-hmm. Last year, I had a phenomenal speaker. His name's Cujo. Was, because he's not doing it anymore, was the real Top Gun, the movie that Tom Cruise made. And he wrote a book, Debrief to Win. And one of the things that I learned from him that impacted the way that I run things now is that whenever you have a mission, you need to have some sort of a performance yardstick. Mm-hmm. And one of the frustrations that he pointed out that I've always had is this rating scale of like 1 to 5, which is completely subjective. And you have no way of knowing if you're going to succeed because it's a reflection that's afterwards versus having an upfront mission, a performance yardstick that everyone's clear on. Mm-hmm. So I started introducing this to my groups, and we came up with what I thought was a brilliant yardstick that I surveyed them, and they said at the end of the meeting that it would be a success if they were walking away with an actionable takeaway, something they learned that they could put into action. And if they put it in action, that would improve their leadership skills, that would improve their organizations, their family lives, their community. So it was objective. Either you wrote something down or not. And then the key to accountability is that everyone in the group has to come up with something. So you might have to help your partner, you have to lean in, you have to look for possibilities. So I introduced this, and it went really well with my first group, and they loved it. And afterwards, the meeting was a success, and everything looked good.
Yeah.
And then I went to another group, and I had a couple people in that group that said, well, I don't want to have to write something down just to check a box or just to write something down. And somebody else said, it's just whether or not I feel like it was a good meeting or not. So then we discussed for way too long about what other measurable objectives we could come up with. And finally, I was just frustrated, and I gave up and I moved on. And of course, at the end of the meeting, when people were talking about how the meeting went, they didn't have a yardstick. So it all went to how they felt at the end of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the situation.
Yeah.
What would you say, or what questions do you have?
Okay. Well, first, I love how I feel inspired hearing the story about Cujo and just, like, what is it to have a mission and to have really clear feedback, right? And what
Yes.
you're taking away from the mission. So I just want to like buy into that being a valuable way to be clear so that we can make continual progress. So I think that's really awesome and what I'm hearing. And maybe I need to ask you a question just to hear more about what's the dilemma. So I'm imagining you talked about the first group and they kind of snapped into this, dropped into, yeah, okay, let's do it. And you implemented it, or they accepted it as a new way. And they kind of accepted your suggestion and it became easy for them to say yes. And then it sounds like you took it to the next group, and that's where it wasn't like a uniformly, or there wasn't immediate consensus that yes, let's do this. So there was something that happened there where you actually then ended up in almost maybe a negotiation or a little bit of like backtracking, like, okay, maybe we don't have to do it. Like it became murky, it sounds like. Is that?
Exactly. Yeah, it became murky. There was this resistance that I felt in the room. And, as a leader, as a chair, when I meet with resistance, I think, coming from my days of being a CEO, that I would be more like, well, this is the way it's going to get done, which I know is not facilitative, but it is a lot more efficient. I'll tell you that.
Right on. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And if it's mission critical, if I'm flying a jet airplane, if I'm a test pilot, I absolutely want to know that it with 100% confidence that something's going to happen. With a group and with the culture of the group, which does involve our objective reality, like things that we can see as object that are very tangible and measurable. But groups also include the subjective part of our feelings, our emotions, maybe our inspiration that comes up. I walk in with no ideas, but 5 minutes later in the conversation, ideas start popping up. All those things come out of our subjectivity. So you're kind of in a mode where you have to negotiate both the objective and the subjective part of the group. And by asking questions and opening it up, we start to hear more of the differences. So in some ways, that's what sounds like what happened in your second group, that there was room, that you had created enough room, an invitation for different points of view to come up, that it wasn't just you directing, making an executive decision, as we say, and saying, this is what we're going to do from now on. It's a great plan. Let's try this out for a certain amount of time. So maybe does that make sense so far?
Yes. No, I could have at that point said, no, I'm sorry. I understand what you're saying, but this is what we're going to do, which would have been authoritarian. But I didn't. I made the choice to listen and try and understand their points of view.
Yeah.
And what it did is I got stuck. The meeting got stuck. Now we're spending 30 minutes talking about something that was simply, for me, a request that maybe I should have just formed that this is a request. But I wanted the whole group to buy in, because the results that I saw from the first meeting was that people were clear on what the objective is, and they got to celebrate. And yes, I succeeded today. And my idea is that they write down every month that one thing that they committed to, and then the next month that they review it. So by the end of the year, they can see that they made progress. And progress leads to satisfaction. That's what all the research shows, is that's the greatest source of satisfaction, is that when we see that we've made progress in an area. And just like at the end of every meeting saying, well, I feel like it was a good meeting.
Yeah. It's kind of loosey-goosey. Yeah.
Very loosey-goosey.
Yeah. Yeah. So there might be, when we think about this, I know how powerful you are in communications, where you're very influential. You have a great capacity to sell me on an idea or a way to encourage me, and I can see the benefit, and I can get excited about the vision, the picture that you paint of what it could do. And you just did that so skillfully. So just that little segment about why it's so great, and at the end of the year what it feels like, you're really tapping into something there. So let's hold that up as one example, one possibility, or one choice of telling and selling something to people. So if you're the CEO, you have done your own research, talked to people, consolidated a view that says this is going to be good for the organization. I trust this will work. I'm going to take this forward and roll it out. This is something I'm going to share, and I'm going to, maybe selling feels like a hard line, but I'm going to sell people on this because I've done the work. I want them to do this. It's going to be good for them. And you're very confident. So if you're really clear and unambiguous that that's what you're doing, that's a really valid and can be a strong approach. And what I'm hearing from you is that you didn't go into that second group in that way with an intention to say, I'm just going to sell this on to them because it's so strong. There was it sounded like a bit of lack of clarity about how you were orienting. And in some ways, the confusion that maybe you ended up receiving came from perhaps mixed signals about you consulting them rather than saying, this is a really good idea, let's implement it. It might have been more, this is a good idea, but what do you think about it? And maybe opening the door to the possibility that this could be different, that we could have a variety of options. And when that's not clear for you, you can end up with disappointment. Like it didn't go the way I wanted, but I wasn't really clear what I wanted, or I didn't get what I needed. And when I think about the way I communicated it and how I framed it or how I responded, there might have been something there that was adding to the results, basically, which is people weren't aligned. You didn't know how to get closure. So there's something about that, just having a really clear intention, that I think if we were looking at, the next time, being really clear about, is this a consultative thing where the group itself will shape it? Like, do I want to empower the group to consider this option and then formulate their best approach and be really empowered to do that? Or do I want them to adopt this process that's working for the other group? Like, we already know there's some excitement and people can see it. So, we might just hold those two options and say, well, is it more about having the group feel empowered to take on the idea of an evaluation approach that for them, or feedback approach that for them would be meaningful? Or let's try this. It's proven to be meaningful elsewhere. Let's be in an experiment and let's do this for a certain amount of time. And maybe then the question with that second option would be, how do we adopt it to make it, like, is there anything we want to adapt? Given that we're going to do this, is there anything we could adapt to make this even more useful for us or more meaningful? And maybe there's some room in part of the implementation that the group would then engage around.
So what I'm hearing is that if I'm clear, that this is what we're going to do, and I know in my own head that I'm telling them what, this is what we're going to do, but I'm selling them on the idea of it, hoping that we're going to get buy-in. But in sales, somebody can always say no.
Yeah.
So I could get, I had most of the group buy in. I mean, I had 20 people in the room, and only 2 were saying, well, I want to see how I feel at the end of the meeting. Maybe I should have just gone with, well, most of us feel like this would be productive.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So, so let's separate out 2 things The first is what is your actual intention? You're leading something, you're bringing a change into a group. Are you intending to have the group decide, or are you intending for the group to receive and then maybe do something about implementing it for them? So that's the first kind of first decision point. And if you are saying that the group can decide whether they will adopt it or not, that it's actually not a given, it's up to the group. Part of what's needed to really support a group to do a good job and to have the right time frame for the conversation, because I also heard a little bit of like time pressure comes up when there's dissent and different points of view. It's like opening it up and, oh my gosh, we only have 15 minutes, we can't solve this now, and then it feels like we're wasting time. So the way to prevent that experience is to be more clear about what's the process, who's making the decision, what kind of decision-making rule are we using, and how much time do we need to do it well. And so the efficiency of that was also wasn't possible because it kind of came up spontaneously with people resisting. But if you had planned it to be that way and to say the group will have the final decision today, and then to clarify what the decision is going to be about and how we'll decide what rule we're going to use, that could make it really efficient. And I think sometimes participation involving other people in decision making, like one reason we don't do it is it feels too complicated, feels too unruly, don't know when we're finished. There's some skills that can really help make that clear.
Yeah, because when you have a group of 20 New York City type A CEOs, yeah. I can never get 100% agreement on anything because everyone has their way of looking at things, their own perception, and a lot of confidence in their opinions. But what I heard that I didn't do that I could do the next time that would be useful is I could say, look, we're not going to discuss this for more than 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. This is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. If anyone sees any way that we could improve on it, you can make a suggestion now, but we're not going to have a long, involved conversation about it. And ultimately, I'm the one that's going to make the final decision. So I'm being clear on the amount of time that we're taking, and I'm being clear on the decision-making process.
Yes, and the reason why. Why are we doing it this way? Yeah, because you're also, in some ways, what you're doing is getting their buy-in, not to the final approach, but your buy-in to this process. Because you're saying, look, this is really important. It's a high-level thing for us to look at. Here's a way to do it. You're commanding expertise, like the trust that people can place in you as you frame up what it's about and why it's important for us to do it this way, is what allows people to relax and say, sure, I'll go along with the process. I'll participate in the way that you're asking me. And that's the difference between maybe what you outlined at the beginning, where it was a little murky about, is it everyone gets to decide? Like, is it important to everyone? Maybe it's not important to half the group. They don't even think about it, et cetera. That murkiness really gets resolved when they have a trusted framework to work within, or a trusted setup that tells them what this is about and why it's important. So that would definitely really help. And then you can determine, like, is it my decision? Because there's other alternatives, right, for you to decide. It could be that the group decides, but how do you make that efficient and effective? And so do you need a discussion? Do you need to do something like, let's do pros and cons on a flip chart? Yes. We'll get all of those out and we'll see what we have. Or is it to actually get two alternatives, maybe from 5 minutes of open discussion about why do we think it would be good? How could it work? How can we see this maybe being adapted for who we are and what we want our meetings to be like? You get those ideas, then you frame up what are the two alternatives that seem to be the best. And then you can have everyone vote and just say, we're going to go with the majority vote for whatever the two alternatives are. So when you're with a group, you're doing the same, like there's the same kind of conceptual decision-making process that you would have if you were doing it solo on your own, which sometimes we don't even, it's automatic. We don't go in a stepwise way with most decisions that we're making day to day. We're good at making decisions. We don't need to break it apart. But with the group, taking them through that stepwise process, just like problem solving, becomes a really trustable way for the group to navigate its way through. And then you're not belaboring things by different opinions, things that happen typically is that you'll think that the group is converging, that all the options are kind of, we've already talked about all the options. Let's narrow it down to one or two choices. And you'll really believe that that's happened. And then someone will come up with, maybe they just woke up from thinking about something else, they go, well, what's this conversation about? And then they throw in a bomb of some other, and that's when your skillfulness on, how light you are on your feet, but redirecting people and where the attention and energy is becomes really useful. It's kind of, how can you finesse that situation? And always, the principle I think is like, let me include that person's perspective, but not get sidetracked by it. So it's kind of a acknowledgement of it. And we're past that point. And maybe you'll have something to say as we get into implementation. You can bring that comment back and we'll see if it still applies. People are generally supportive that way.
I love that. So I see that there's a couple of alternatives that I could use. I mean, we talked about tell and sell. I could tell them that we're going to discuss it and have pros and cons and look for alternative suggestions. And then I could have them vote on it. I could declare if it's a unanimous vote. So those are options that I would have as a facilitative leader.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And then, I think one of the questions we want to ask before we get into designing a process for something like that is to say, why does this matter for this group? And do they feel the same way I do about it? Because sometimes we can be passionate about something that the group itself isn't aware of, doesn't have a view on. And that conversation, again, if you were starting up to frame it up and say, this is why we're going to do it, you're telling them the why. But that why conversation is really important before doing anything that might include steps in a process to vote on something. Because if it doesn't matter to people, they're not going to want to waste time going through voting and counting dots on a page. It's belaboring something that really doesn't have value. So I think that sometimes is the really important question we miss, which is, what value do you want from our meetings? Let's talk about that. Are we getting it? And if we could have a regular measure at the end of every meeting to reinforce it, because everyone at the table knows about performance, tracking performance, getting feedback on how we're doing. They know the value of that. Is that something that we would value? And if you can get a yes to that, then you've got the buy-in that you would need to implement the best measure. And then they're trusting, of course, your expertise and because you're trustworthy, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. I'm going to give that a try at the next meeting with this group and see what happens.
So do you have one group to go that you haven't introduced this to?
No, all of my groups, I've introduced it to. Every group now is bought in except this one group came up with that little dissent there. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I know that we're there for the process. What we do in these group meetings is that people bring a decision, a challenge, a problem, an opportunity, and the group is there. My job is to help facilitate the process so that they ask questions. We see if we can determine what the root cause of the issue is, and that the group can offer perspectives so that people can see what their blind spots are, or maybe get some new ideas that they hadn't seen before. So that's what the real purpose of the meeting is. That's the meat of the meeting, and discussing like whether or not you got a takeaway or not was something that I want to add, because I want them to be able to look back at the end of the year and see, hey, wow, not only did I help and contribute, or maybe I was helped and contributed to at this meeting, but I'm learning something every single meeting because that's, I was a Vistage member for 10 plus years. And I think that's how we grew to become the 58th fastest is because I took something that I learned from every meeting and I, put it into place. Execution.
I can only imagine the amount of possible like new insights, new ways of seeing things, new perspectives, new ideas, new approaches. Learning from each other is really powerful. I'm curious. I just have one lingering curiosity about the resistance and what we do with resistance when it comes up.
Yes.
And I wonder, sometimes resistance feels like they're a no, they're not going along. And then there might be a sequence in my interior, maybe I'm not aware of it, but where I'm like also then judging the no, like they're resisting, they're getting in the way of the group doing something that's good for them. That person's not thinking it through, that person's maybe a jerk, those possibilities, right? My own biases, my own judgment can come up.
Yes.
And so, yeah, when you say yes, tell me where that yes is coming from.
Yeah, I notice that when somebody's resisting, my great idea, that I do have that judgment that comes up. I mean, I can't help myself. All the things that you just said that, they don't understand. Sometimes it's a judgment of myself. I didn't explain it very well. I didn't do it right. If I just try a little harder or say it a different way, or I love it when I go to another country. People just talk louder because they think if they say it louder, you'll understand it.
Let me tell you another reason why. Let me just download all this stuff. So it becomes about me fixing it somehow,
Yes.
And I think that is one thing when we're a really good facilitative leader, we take everything as feedback for us and for the idea and for what is needed, what's needed in this moment. And I might have gone in with a plan for this certain thing to be accomplished. And when I encounter resistance, that's feedback. And I think the best skill that we have is to be able to pause, which may be just a minute one breath, pause, and just let that feedback drop in and see if we can at the same time open our curiosity to be asking, what is this about? Like, what is this resistance? And sometimes we can be surprised by what we notice, because it's also possible that the person resisting might be someone who has some unmet learning needs that they haven't quite asked for or they haven't experienced yet. And a checkbox doesn't solve the issue that they actually care about. Are you following me? Which is also really aligned with what the checkboxes are for.
Yeah.
A way of tracking my own learning. So maybe their own learning has been unmet. And so they're resisting writing something about it because that doesn't solve the learning that they're craving. And
Yes.
if we could drop in and listen, and because this has happened, I can feel in my own experience times when this, like what feels like immediate resistance is actually an unmet need or an underlying interest that hasn't had room yet in the space we're in. Like maybe we're going too fast, or the order of who speaks, or the round table takes too long, or whatever. The resistance can just be a need that could be so easy to include to actually satisfy the person that's resisting. And they're resisting just, it's the best offer that they have in the moment. That's, the way that they say things, whatever. So if you can be curious and pick that up, in a way, it does even more than having the approach of what am I taking away and what can I take action on, by helping someone have the learning that they're looking for addressed, possibly.
I love that, Rebecca. I mean, that's my goal. I want to be curious. I want to take that pause and at least be in that curiosity. That's what I have admired about you so much. When I saw you facilitating our retreat for our CEOs, the way that you met with the resistance, as you may recall, there was a lot of resistance from certain CEOs that we had to deal with, and you were just so present, and I didn't see you get flustered at all. and able to deal with it in a way that was like a jujitsu move, like take their energy that they came at you with such strength and move it to a learning opportunity for them, and you did that so easily. I guess that's what facilitative means, is easy, right?
Right. Easy. Yeah. And it's learning for them, and it's learning for me, because I'm learning this system of human beings and how we are together in any group I'm in. That's part of that's the humility of this approach to leadership, is that I don't understand all the dynamics before I walk in the room. Like, we're fresh. Every meeting we come into, there's a fresh combination of energy, of disappointments and hopes, of fears and boredom, and all kinds of states are happening, and thoughts are kind of in that mix. And part of the mystery, of this being people centered is like, well, who are these people and what's up for them, and how are we together, and are we able to relax and enjoy being together? And a lot of it is just relaxing our nervous systems, right? Attuning with each other, really showing that we're listening, and that we're not just driving past everybody on a highway. We're actually, gathering together and really dropping into be together with the particularities of who each one of us is and what we care about. Like, when we can do that, we can relax, we can enjoy each other, we can get into amazing high performance together. Flow states come from that way of being. And it benefits all of us. We're all contributors to the same experience, with each different way of being and different set of ideas and etc. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. And I'm so appreciative of you. I mean, thank you for this coaching session today. Thank you for everything that I learned from you on an ongoing basis. Thank you for what you do in the world, and in our world, for impacting leaders and their organizations and our community. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. I just love our conversations, and the possibility in that we can see when we can be with leaders and really listen to what the reality of leadership is, what it takes to be a leader, the amount of courage and perspective taking. And hopefully through the conversations, you and I certainly are learning a lot. I know, to be able to see more and include more and hopefully have greater impact. So thank you for this opportunity.
welcome. And if people wanted to learn more about you or more about facilitative leadership, where would they go?
Great question. We're on LinkedIn. So you can
Yes.
find me, Rebecca Colwell, on LinkedIn, or 10 Directions, the company. We also have a web page, 10directions.com. Those are probably the two best places, the two best homes. And certainly, please reach out if anyone listening to this has questions or ideas or just wants to get connected. I'd be happy to have a chat.
Right. Well, again, thank you so much, Rebecca. This has been Helping Leaders Achieve What Matters.